Hello, everyone, dear friends. It's so good to see you all, and that I have to use an arrow on my screen to see even more of you. I heard a quote in someone say in a Dharma talk yesterday, silence is unceasing eloquence. It is the best language. So for me to watch everybody come on screen in silence and just see people appear by magic. I think of Zoom as magic. It's really wonderful to be able to connect in this way. I'm Suzanne Kilkus, the entrusted teacher here in Open Door, and it is so wonderful. Our retreat committee has been preparing for this for several months, and at this stage of it, it's just like we're ready to go, and that's what feels so good right now. We're here to practice together, to practice the Dharma with each other, to move and to sit in meditation, to support each other in cultivating wonder and curiosity rather than fear and panic in this life of uncertainty. Roshi Bernie Glassman is known to have said that enlightenment is an accident and practice makes us accident prone. Whatever our enlightenment experiences, we need each other. We need to feel and know we're not alone. This last year of pandemic physical separation has clearly shown us this. And because of this, we have created many ways to make safe contact and deepen our bonds with our loved ones, with our spiritual friends, with our communities. We hope this spring retreat experience deepens your practice and connection to life as it arises in every moment, in every relationship, in every way. So right now, I'm going to invite you to take a moment to look around your screen if you haven't already done that. Even move the arrows if you can. A very wide open door, a very wide open door community, as Flint commented in an email earlier today when we all noticed this. We're floating in from Arkansas, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Iowa, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Texas, Virginia, and Wisconsin. I hope I've listed them all. Don't want to leave anybody out. How fortunate we are to be able to be together for this weekend. After Flynn's teaching this evening, we'll briefly go over the schedule for the week. So right now, I want to turn it over to our beloved guiding teacher, Flynn Sparks. I think this is the 18th year that Flint is bringing a retreat with us.
Good.
So welcome, Flint. So good to have you float in from Hawaii to our Cloud Zendo.
18, we're in late adolescence now, early adulthood. It's thrilling to see everyone come on the screen because I see the faces of people from so many places, as Suzanne has remarked, and people that I've known and practiced with. It's been in my heart for so many years, and it's wonderful to see you. And then to see new faces and a few new names. I just feel honored that all of you would show up so we could be together in this way, which is very different than when we're in the same room, but that you take the time and the effort and the care to come is the foundation, one of the great foundations of practice. As many of you know, I often like to review what we've written and what we've sort of advertised as what this is about. Each retreat, in some ways, is the same. The forms may change a bit, the schedule may be a little different, but the essence and the teachings are all the Buddha Dharma offered in hopefully a way that's fresh and that reminds us of what's most important. And one of the things that is consistent is that we sit together. And maybe it would be useful for us to sit even just for a few minutes, just a couple of minutes, to settle into this shared space in our cloud Zindo, in that silence that Suzanne was speaking about before we launch into things. And as we sit in these few minutes, I'll read into that silent space some of the statements and questions that are descriptors and invitations into our theme that we'll enjoy this weekend. So I'll invite the bell, and let's just sit in silence. Allow yourself to have even wherever you're sitting, on a chair, on the sofa, on the floor, doesn't matter, at least a little bit of sense of zazen for these next few minutes. In some ways, you might even think of our sitting, the simplicity of zazen, of shikantaza, as an expression of the title that the Open Door Organizing Committee chose as our title. We sit as wonder in the face of uncertainty. Just our upright stillness and silence, the expression of awakening, as Dogen would say. Our practice enlightenment is wonder in the face of uncertainty. I'll read through the very brief description of our theme and just let it settle into this space that we're creating together. We never really know what is coming. We are constantly walking through the vulnerable territory of impermanence and uncertainty, whether we are awake to it or not. But this past year has brought it all so much closer than ever before. Even though we may not know what is next, we are nevertheless challenged and invited to remain upright, attentive, alert, and responsive. What does the Dharma teach in terms of our human capacity for responding to suffering in its many forms, even as we embrace the uncertainties of life? And how do we maintain wonder and imagination without closing down? Finally, how do we continue to work for the benefit of others when we feel our own life is challenged? Without manipulating your breath, feel its fullness just as it is, each breath. And without trying to manipulate your body to be a good Zen student, just attend to its wholeness and its uprightness and its dignity just as it is. It's wonderful to sit together and to be reminded of something that has brought us together, although I know that a lot of times we don't even read the description. We just see that it's time to sit together and enjoy a retreat, and we feel that impulse, that longing to return, a longing to return to each other, which is the same longing to return to our life as we shift and find our way toward what we hope will be a post-pandemic world. And so we'll speak some about this longing and this return. There was a piece I happened across again recently, which is actually from Peter Levitt's introduction to his volume, The Essential Dogen, the translations he did with Kaz Tanahashi. If you've not spent time with Kaz, seeing his beautiful way in which he shapes things with calligraphy and with his body and with his whole being, you get to see wonder in action. And if you've not spent time with Peter Levitt, he's such a warm, close friend of mine. His wisdom in his poetry and translation are really remarkable. And in the introduction to their shared volume of Dogen's translations, Peter refers to a poem by Allen Ginsberg, which was written in 1954. The poem's title is Song, like a song that is sung, that he says acknowledges the weight of our human circumstance and suffering in a particular and somewhat unusual way. And that caught my attention because we're attending to the weight of our human circumstance these days, and suffering in particular in some unusual ways. Here's how the poem begins in its first few words and lines. Under the burden of solitude, under the burden of dissatisfaction, the weight we carry is love. Under the burden of solitude, under the burden of dissatisfaction, the weight we carry is love. And Peter writes, suffering under such a weight is often accompanied by a longing, as the poet Ginsberg well knew. And so his poem expresses the longing to return to that human possibility known by many names, including wholeness, oneness, unity, true self, though Ginsberg simply called it love. He was quite young when the poem was written and was inspired by an intuitive certainty that the twin burdens of solitude and dissatisfaction would be relieved if the realization of wholeness or love might find its full expression in the world. And I'll pause there for a second. I thought that was a beautiful expression of what we're about in our practice. He goes on, of course, Ginsberg also understood that his longing for completion was not his alone, but part of the common spiritual yearning experienced by people in every place and time. And so he acknowledges this in the final lines through the repetition of a single affirmative word, followed by other rhythmic phrasing that functions like the beating of a heart. And here's just the last bit. I've read the first. This is the very ending. Yes. Yes. That's what I wanted. I always wanted. I always wanted to return to the body where I was born. Yes, yes, that's what I wanted. I always wanted. I always wanted to return to the body where I was born. The body of wholeness. That's the end of the poem. This body of wholeness, the body of unity, what Dogen later called, or earlier called, the body after the final body. And what Ginsberg identifies as the body of love. And it's this body that he longed for. And whatever words are used to point to this foundational or primordial condition of oneness is really acknowledged by almost every spiritual tradition, every wisdom tradition. And the poet refers to the journey as a return, just like I mentioned earlier, this coming home, like our refuge, to fly back, to come home. And one way to think about this return to wholeness, our shared longing at this moment, is the transmutation of personal longing, even a self-centered longing at times, but our personal longing into bodhicitta, the aspiration that all beings return to their original body of awakening, which actually has never dimmed, but which we may not be able to feel or see under the weight of current circumstances. And this is the alchemy of practice, which transforms personal longing into the heart and mind of a bodhisattva. And this is truly a wonder. in the face of uncertainty. This is possible. This is our direction. So probably many of you have heard the comment that commentators will make about Dogen, saying that, he says everything in the first few lines, or the first few words even, of what he writes in his complex essays, each one that you might read from the Shobogenzo, but then the remainder is commentary. But he gives you everything right in the beginning. And the description of our retreat, which I read as we sat, if it's written well, also tells the whole story up front. And then through our shared practice over these next few days, we open it together like a present. As Ginsberg said, under the burden of solitude, my goodness, this last year has carried some of that burden. Under the burden of dissatisfaction, there's been so much withheld and so much loss. Under the burden of solitude, under the burden of dissatisfaction, the weight we carry is love. And the question in some ways is, how are we going to carry it? How do we carry it forward? How do we open it? And so I'm going to go back through each of the lines in the description of the retreat. And we're going to open them like small presents. The first line, it was just a statement. We never really know what is coming. We never really know what's coming. Well, this is always true. It's not just because of the pandemic or economics or politics or social unrest. This is always true. And it's always been true every day, under every single circumstance. We don't know what's coming. And our practice, or our call, is to remain awake, attentive, and aware. Resting in beginner's mind, so that we can see as clearly as we can what it is that's unfolding and where the wakefulness is, what our response might be in each moment, which then is also part of the unfolding. It's not that we're separate from the unfolding. We don't really know what's coming. That's always the case. There's always the unfolding contingency of each moment and our responses to it, which then weaves into that unfolding. And it's always like this. And we have a choice about how we're going to meet what comes. Some of you know that, and have heard the opening line in the TEDx talk that I was invited to do some years ago, when I was with a number of people who were offering these beautiful talks about changing the world. And I started by simply saying, my message isn't about changing the world. It's about how to meet a world that never seems to stop changing. And this ever-changing world, this statement in the beginning, we never really know what's coming, is part of the koan of life, an unfolding story. A koan is the case, the story, an unfolding story in which we're all embedded, every one of us. None of us is outside of it. And yet, like koans, we meet it often as if we're trying to solve it, instead of living our way into it and following where it leads. As some of you know who have done koan practice, or even read them or studied them and used them as guides, the koans all show you the power of resting in unpredictability and uncertainty, because that's where they all lead us. You don't know what the outcome of the koan is going to be. And there's great wisdom resting in that truth and the not knowing. That's where the wisdom lies. Suffering and despair rest in the certainty. And you've heard me speak of John Tarrant's descriptions of that at times. Suffering and despair rest in the certainty. Wisdom rests in the unknowing. And especially if you've already decided what the outcome is going to be or should be, for sure there'll be despair and suffering. So when I know what the outcome is going to be, when I attempt to talk to my friend or my family member or anyone close to me, I'm never really quite present, because I know where things are. I think I know, so everything is actually closed down. And I'm not finding where the freedom is in the situation. Instead, I'm just waiting or giving a lecture or something. But the koan of our life, we don't know what's coming. When that removes our certainty, that's the escape from the self-centered prison that we make. When we're not bound by the stories of our lives to which we're so committed, these fictions, really, and not bound by the effort of knowing that, trying to know what everything is too quickly and where it's going, what it should be, then a new kind of freedom can appear. And your body can feel more at ease. And then anything we look at, the trees, your friends, walls, something that you thought you didn't like, suddenly becomes full of possibility. And then you can experience the wonder and beauty of just being here in this world as consciousness. The wonder and beauty of just being here in this world of consciousness. And that's the direction of our retreat. We never know really what's coming. The second statement in the description, and I'm just walking through each statement, you can go back and take a look at it if you want at some point. The second, actually two that go together. This is the way it's written. We are constantly walking through the vulnerable territory of impermanence and uncertainty, whether we're aware of it or not, but this past year has brought it all so much closer than ever before. Even though we don't know what is next, we're nevertheless challenged to remain upright, attentive, alert, and responsive. So the immediacy of the pandemic, the way that it strikes us each day, and the power of what we see in the media with deaths, with some of the social unrest that's involved in that, with climate change. The immediacy, the way it hits us, can be seen as a desperate sort of thing, but with all of its horror and sometimes even its beauty, but this is the entrance to wonder. Without knowing. This is embodied immediacy. And anything which dulls this, embodied immediacy will turn us away from wonder. And anything which supports and encourages this embodied immediacy, like when we're sitting, when we're walking, when we're working with each other, anything which supports and encourages this immediacy is going to brighten the creative light of wonder. And this is one of the reasons we include movement and embodied practices early each day in our practice cycle of retreat. And it's the foundation of so many of our forms as are transmitted and maintained in Zen practice, which are mindful embodiment and mutual care through our forms, the way we enact and the way we move together with our bodies. And I use the word upright, attentive and alert, responsive. Well, uprightness is this dignity of being aligned with actually the precepts, using our body, of being upright, balanced, truthful, and ethical in the way we express ourselves in everyday action with our body. So upright means much more than just somehow physically making ourselves upright. Attentive and alert is not difficult. We have to be at least awake enough and aware enough, but also to bring an intentional mindfulness, an intentionality to each moment, remaining awake and flexible and responsive, which is the last word, responsive, this sort of readiness and willingness to remain engaged in life. And has your willingness, has your attentiveness and alertness, has your uprightness, has this changed during the last year, over the last year? So much has changed. There's a small Rumi poem, and by the way, anytime I mention a poem or some important quote or an old story, each day, at the end of the day, I'm going to send them to you in an email, so you'll get them. You don't have to wait, you can review them. And there's a small Rumi piece entitled Don't Go Back to Sleep, which most of you are familiar with. It's very commonly read, and the piece that is often expressed, because it's so lovely, is the breeze at dawn has secrets to tell. Don't go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Don't go back to sleep. People are going back and forth across the door sill where the two worlds touch. The door is round and open. Don't go back to sleep. It's a beautiful, it's sort of like a little poem for open doors in community in a way. Don't go back to sleep. But that's actually not the whole poem. There's a part before, which often is not included. And here's what comes before. For years, copying other people, I tried to know myself. From within, I couldn't decide what to do. Unable to see, I heard my name being called. Then I walked outside. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell. This first part isn't often used, and I think it's quite lovely. For years, copying other people, I tried to know myself. For years, following what was sure, what I thought would be the way. Not finding my own, I tried to know myself. But from within, I couldn't decide what to do. And unable to see, I heard my name being called. You feel that call of practice. You feel that intention, something's moving. And you know you have to respond. Then you walked outside. What do you walk outside of? The self-centered perspective, the sense of whatever your personal longing is, and feel the breeze, the freshness of opening, which helps you not go back to sleep. And so in this second piece of the description, we're walking through this vulnerable territory. It's very close. How do we remain upright, alert, and responsive? Not going back to sleep with this freshness. And I think our retreat is the encouragement of that freshness. Then following on that, the third part of our description says, and once again, I'm reading from the retreat description, what does the Dharma teach in terms of our human capacity for responding to suffering in its many forms, even as we embrace the uncertainties of life? What does the Dharma teach about this? About how we can make it through these things? Well, once again, as I was going through these, I realized, well, this is the only thing the Dharma ever teaches. How to meet suffering without closing down. How to meet suffering without staying too centered on the self. How to meet suffering and not make things worse for other people. And at the center, it suggests that it's necessary to keep saying yes to life, which means choosing your life over and over and over again outside of our personal preferences, outside of our conditional habits and reactivity. Those things will keep coming, and we have to keep choosing that and say, oh yes, there I am. Freedom from reactivity, even freedom within reactivity, is the essence of nirvana. While our unconscious playing out of old habitual patterns is samsara. Freedom from or with reactivity is nirvana. Unconscious playing out of those old habits is samsara. And of course, the Buddha's teachings, including what are classically called the Four Noble Truths, teach us about how to meet this pattern. And as many of you know, Stephen Batchelor suggests that we look at these as 4 tasks, which I rather like because it's quite active and it brings us back to embodied immediacy, rather than some idea we should follow. And the way that Batchelor describes this, he says the 4 tasks that the Buddha was suggesting is that we embrace suffering, let our reactive emotions be, see the stopping of reactivity, and respond with care. Number 1, embrace suffering. Often we hear that translation of all life is characterized by dukkha or suffering. It's not a great translation, but embrace suffering. How do we turn toward the inevitable? The way life is actually constructed, but not get lost in it. To embrace, when you embrace something, it's not that you're simply agreeing, but you're letting yourself be close. John Tarrant famously said that there are no circumstances under which it is wise to refuse life. So our job is to choose life. And actually, oddly, to choose our suffering, not to say, oh, great, I'm suffering, I'm glad. No, this is what's happening. I'm going to choose to meet it. I'm going to unblend through practice, be able to step back so I'm not enmeshed in it, but not as a way to get away, as a way to turn toward, to embrace. This is what I'm meeting. This is what I'm sitting to face. Embrace suffering. And then secondly, Batchelor's words are let our reactive emotions be. What if we just don't feed them? We see our reactivity, the way we grasp and hold on, cling to what we want and push away, run away, do anything to back off from what we don't. Then we find ourselves being confused, even foolish or stupid sometimes because we don't know or don't pay any attention. But if we don't feed our reactivity, especially in the habitual ways that we've learned just as protectors, and continue to step into a larger space through practice gently and being gentle with ourselves, because it's often difficult to do so and we slide back, but to keep stepping into this larger space, to meet each moment in a fresh way, the breezes at dawn, rather than trying to change or get rid of the difficulty. It's counterintuitive to embrace the suffering. Oh, there you are. And then to let that reactivity settle. To let it settle. And third task, to see the cessation or the stopping of the reactivity. Through the containment of our care and attention. Through intimacy with our actual suffering. We begin to care for what arises and allowing it to soften, for those burdens to fall away, to not feed the reactivity, but to let all the energy keep moving as just our life. And then number 4, to respond with care, mindful, diligent care. and the world through wise and compassionate action. And the 4 tasks are all set in that direction. And this is part of our return that we're talking about in this retreat, because they flesh out what it means to care. And for the Buddha, care was the cardinal virtue that encompasses all others. We've spoken about this many times. It's the elephant's footprint. His final words: things fall apart, tread the path with care, with appamada, with diligent, mindful care. So in facing an unpredictable post-pandemic world, and post other things, I'll just use post-pandemic as our key, because there's so many other things involved right now, I know, that threatens our notions of health and safety and civic cooperation and long-term survival. This would entail, let's go through the tasks. Number 1, embracing the possibility that we might have to live our way into a life characterized by new habits. It's not going to go back, expressed in our work, in our family life, our social interactions, and travel, all of which mainly feel like loss and even pain or the extreme kind of panic when compared to the relative ease, our dream remembrance of pre-pandemic life, the way we fondly remember it. But maybe it wasn't exactly like that. So embracing the possibility that life will be quite different, embracing. Number 2, let our reactions, emotion be, not be paralyzed by our personal anxiety or the social conflict caused by these changes, by all the demands that are coming, and as we reorient ourselves and other people. This one is really difficult, coming off of the last several years of the sort of political climate still exists, but not being paralyzed by our social conflicts and the personal anxieties that come with them. And number 3, see the stopping of reactivity, dwelling in a space of fearless awareness. By fearless, I don't mean without fear. It's more fierce than that. Because you might have fear, but not being paralyzed by the fear. Dwelling in a space that can hold the feelings so that they can relax. And that's the fierceness of that sort of full wakeful presence. And then number 4, respond with care. Well, responding creatively to participate in a new, more awake, more balanced, and healthy world. So it's just a way of kind of playing with these tasks in the face of where we are right now. And these 4 tasks are, they're an invitation to engage much more directly, regardless of what our beliefs are about the origins of the problems or about the nature of ourself, all those things that we try to cling on to, like when we're trying to solve a koan. But by entering into this, through our practices, this sort of contemplative, empathic, and also an existential, larger relationship with the pain of the world, not just our pain. That's part of that shift from personal longing to bodhicitta. So entering this contemplative, empathic, and existential relationship with the pain of the world, then you can respond with a creative, situation-specific compassion. We can tackle whatever crisis is at hand, which might be unprecedented. Goodness knows, most of us have felt like so much of what's happened in the last year, in the last several years, has been unprecedented. But we're still called through practice to find imaginative responses that may not have occurred to anyone before. And of course, we have to take into account our own tender psychological struggles, which show up as greed and clinging, of dislike and aversions, and our confusions and follies. But I think the primary concern is to continue to return to kind of a responsiveness based on this understanding that practice offers us of all the conditions, that nothing's left out. We're willing to look at our health and the biology of the situation, the social and economic, the religious, political, the social, racial, that underlie and contribute to whatever the current crisis is. And we can do that. It's possible to do that. The fourth, and once again, I'm still working through the statements here that went in the description. The fourth one, how do we maintain wonder and imagination without closing down? This was sort of like the key point that Suzanne was really nudging me toward in this. How do we maintain wonder and imagination without closing down? Of course, we've already started talking about it, because this is the function of practice. This is the function of all practice. Let's make it really simple and personal for a moment. How do you follow the schedule and forms of a retreat without quitting? So this is revealed to us, I think, at least in my case, it's been shown to me when I've been in longer retreats, which we really feel the struggles, the pain, the doubts, the confusion, the sleepiness, the irritations, the longings, all the facets, of closing or clamping down or to the free flow of life energy in all of its forms. It's almost like we're bracing against what's being offered to us and asked of us. So we practice to maintain this larger space, this free flow of life energy, and to become a larger container for this flow of life energy, which is less and less impeded. So we practice this when we sit and we walk, we work, we eat, we clean up, we chant, we care for each other, all embodied immediacy. And it's the embodied immediacy of yes. Like in Ginsberg's poem, yes, this is what I wanted. This is the life I want. I want to return to my wholeness, my completeness. This is my life, this one, and I will choose it. And sometimes it is almost impossible. It's so difficult. I love the statement that the great Christian teacher and mystic Thomas Merton, he once said, true love and prayer are learned in the hour when love becomes impossible and the heart has turned to stone. True love and prayer are learned in that hour, in the hour when love becomes impossible and the heart has turned to stone. Well, that feels like the fourth day of Sesshin to me. When you're in a place where, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And that's when something is possible, because that's when you've let go of the ideas of how you think it should turn out, and it's going to turn out in the answer you think you're going to get, and what it means to be a good student in your mind, the way you've constructed it. But that turn that Merton is talking about, probably only happens and is best done when we're supported and loved by each other. And there's hardly any better way than these sorts of intensive retreats to experience our interconnection and the interpenetrating nature of our relationships with all beings and with each other, which we begin to remember as the foundation of peace and healing, of real joy, and just moments of ordinary happiness. In fact, even the most ordinary, challenging task, like washing the dishes or whatever, become meaningful and fulfilling when we feel a universal connection with the totality of being, when we've come back to the body of our our being. And when we have shared meaning, we're not alone. We're all in this together. And the truth is that, the awakening that we talk about is, I think, only actualized as we practice what's fully presencing in this moment, including what we think of as ourself. So how do we maintain wonder and imagination without closing down? By inviting ourselves to the edge where closing begins to happen and see what's possible there. What's the freedom just beyond it? And the next of our statements, still moving through our statements here, the last question, how do we continue to work for the benefit of others when we feel our own life is challenged? Our life is always challenged, and our vow is always the Bodhisattva vow. Our life is always being challenged. But the biggest challenges mostly arrive when our ideas and expectations are challenged. We have an idea of how it should be, an expectation of how it's going to turn out. And when those things are challenged and thwarted and undermined, that seems to be our biggest challenge. And of course, there are external material challenges that happen all the time. Like you get COVID, or you have a birthday with another zero behind it, like I'm about to have. And death. This Saturday will be 1 year anniversary of my father's death, and we'll be together. Illness, old age, death, and everything that comes in between these markers. Those are real, but the deepest and most pervasive challenges are our intrinsic reactivity to these things, not the things. And this is what's really pointed to, what's really meant when we talk about freedom or liberation. Through sustained and committed shared practice, we find ourselves more and more liberated from the tyranny of our unconscious and unexamined perspectives and reactions to life. We're more freed up from these habitual programs of unexamined thought and speech and action, which play themselves out as our whole life if we don't wake up. And to ask ourselves, what am I doing? What kind of choices am I making? And in the process, it's important to attend to the gratitude of simply living, instead of waiting for the right life to show up. To feel the gratitude of simply living, which nourishes us in the very quest that's at the foundation of practice, to remain committed to working for the benefit of others, even when we're personally challenged. Because this is the nourishment and inspiration which sustains wonder and its expression through compassionate and clear care. If you want to know how to sustain wonder in the face of these difficulties, this is the inspiration and nourishment that maintains it. There's a little sort of practice instruction that Zen Master Hakuin gave, and I've mentioned it in retreat before. But I like it because it's a clever way of thinking about everything gives you an opportunity. He says, make your upper garments into a monk's robe. Make your chair your sitting cushion. Make the mountains, rivers, and the great earth your sitting platform. Make the whole universe your own personal meditation cave. This is the true practice of the sages of the past and of today. In other words, use it all. And what are the essential aspects of this transformational path that this description of our retreat has led us into? Well, there are three essentials, I think, and I'm going to add a couple of them that Peg and I often talk about: practice, path, and vow. What's our practice? What's our path? What's our vow? In our lineage and our tradition, the primary practice is Zazen, and all the practices that issue from that fundamental practice. Zazen is our sort of non-negotiable basis of our shared practice path. And it's a ceremony of expression of our Buddha nature, as Dogen speaks about it. And in some ways, it's a ritual of faith. We engage in the ritual of Zazen as an expression of our faith in our Buddhahood, in awakening, in the natural state. So Zazen is our essential practice. Path, well, the Buddha described to us the Eightfold Path, being in accord with, instead of split off from or entangled with side roads. And when we sit in Zazen as our initial practice, we're enacting being in accord with each breath and with each moment. And so when we think of right view and right intention, if we just shift them, so, okay, here's the path. To be in accord with life as it is. To be in accord with intention. To be in accord with speech that is in accord with life. Our actions are in accord with life. Our livelihood is in accord with life. Our effort, our mindfulness, our concentration is in accord with life. Not with our beliefs, not with our reactivity, but in accord with life as it is. That's our path. Practice, path, and vow. Our vow in this tradition is the Bodhisattva vow. To remain intimate and responsive to all beings in the service of awakening. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. To remain intimate and responsive to all beings in the service of awakening. To clarify all delusions, which obscure truth or bind up the free energy of liberation. To meet every moment and every relationship as an opportunity for awakening, instead of just a pain or a problem. And to both realize and express the body of liberation through immediacy. So our practice, our path, our vow. Zazen, the Eightfold Path, Bodhisattva vow. And there are some essential qualities that issue from this practice, path, vow cycle. And you know what they are. I'm just going to remind you because I want to weave this together just as a reminder. The qualities are taught as the Bodhisattva practices, which are the paramitas. In other words, the essential qualities that come from our practice, our path, and our vow are expressed as generosity, morality, or ethical conduct, vitality, energy and spiritual energy, patience, forbearance, meditation, and wisdom. Different names for the one energy of wakeful, diligent, mindful care of the paramitas of the Bodhisattva. And that we've had entire retreats on just that. So they're taught as these Bodhisattva practices, and they flow as the four immeasurables of the heart and mind, or what we call the Brahma-viharas. Loving kindness, our unconditional friendliness, compassion, our willingness to meet suffering and not turn away too much, a sympathetic joy, our joy in the support and love of others, and equanimity, a bit of a balanced movement. So these are classical qualities that come through our practice, path, and vow. But I want to add two more because we're going to touch on these as we go further through the retreat. Two vehicles, and that is ceremony and community. after being separated for so long, there's this longing for community. And that longing has been immensely creative because it created this. Here we are with all of these states represented and all these people connecting. It's fantastic for me because I haven't been getting on an airplane quite so much, which has been good for the environment and good for my body. And I've gotten to bring together people that I love and care about, and they can see and hear each other. But there's still this longing to touch each other, to be close. I wish I could sit in a room and see all of your faces and feel the energy of your presence, even if I can see your face on the screen while I'm talking. Because there's still that little bit of separation. I had a small practice discussion group last week that I see on a regular basis, and the group decided that they would meet in person for the first time in a year, more than a year. Everyone had been vaccinated, and they met in one of the members' backyards, and they were all gathered together in a circle, and there was one person not there. So I was on the screen on the laptop, and when people began to talk, they began to look at the screen. I said, don't look at the screen, look at each other. You've been looking at a screen for a year, so automatically kind of orient. We have this deep longing. The other piece, ceremony, we focus very little on ceremony in this particular lineage tradition. We have the head student entering and exit ceremonies are powerful ones. We have services that we do. We have the precept celebrations that we do, things like that. But because we're a lay tradition that doesn't emphasize priests and formal kinds of things, we focus very little on ceremony. And that's freed up the entry for so many people. But we also have to understand that we lose something. Because ceremony is a particular kind of container in which we enter the depth of wonder and express the mystery in a shared, embodied manner. And there's nothing to substitute for it. Those of you that have been involved in some of the ceremonies feel the impact. It's not magical, but it is mysterious. Most of the ceremonies we do celebrate something that's already true and acknowledges the sacred in what seems ordinary. And this is one of the entries to wonder. And the form and container of ceremony allows for another kind of alchemy enacted through the ritual. And I know that a lot of you, at least I've heard from a lot of you, have old wounds and painful reactivity attached to rituals and ceremonies. Because somewhere in the past it's been woven into some heavy fabric of dogma or church. Or maybe the ceremonial forms may have simply lost their potency and their beauty and their meaning when you had to do them. Or the ceremonies were, I call it, they're being squandered by lifeless celebrants in a kind of a deadened routine enactment. And this is the loss of wonder. So I want to call this back, not as a change in the way we do things particularly, but over the next couple of days, I would like to invite us to continue to unfold this idea of how to maintain wonder in the face of uncertainty by using a couple of different ceremonies, the forms of the ceremony, as an entry point. And this is what I'm going to ask you to do. This is part of your homework. I want each of you to make sure that you have a little altar. It doesn't have to be any big deal. You don't have to get new furniture or go out and buy things. All I want you to do is to make sure that tomorrow when we meet, you have some little bowl. It doesn't have to be, I mean, this is one that I ring. It can be just like a bowl that you would put cereal in or something, just a little bowl. It can be a nice tea bowl, it could be anything. Something that you think is nice though. A little bowl, and put something in it that you would normally eat. I'm not going to ask you to eat anything, but put something in it. You know, put a cookie in there. Or you can put a little piece of fruit, whatever you'd like in there. I was thinking cookie because I was looking at Steve. I thought, oh, Steve would like a cookie in there. I want you to have a little bowl and then bring something. It might be a picture, it might be a little symbol, it might be a rock, I don't know what it would be. Something that is an expression or points to something that you feel like you've lost during this last year. Doesn't have to be like a person you've lost, that you might have such a thing, but something that around which there might be some grief, let's say. Those are the only two things you have to have. And I'm going to send this to you also. There's a classical piece that is chanted in the Soto Zen liturgy, the title of which, at least in the translations that I've used at the San Francisco Zen Center, is called Hymn to the Perfection of Wisdom. It's a verse which celebrates and honors the wonder of prajna paramita, of the paramita of great wisdom. And it's spoken in a way that suggests that the embodiment of this wisdom is like a universal mother. Listen to these words. I'm going to read two translations. I'll send them to you so you'll have them. And imagine that this is an invitation to wonder. An invitation to step into that larger space and to know that that is you and you are it. Homage to the perfection of wisdom, the lovely, the holy. The perfection of wisdom gives light. Unstained, the entire world cannot stain her. She is a source of light, and from everyone in the triple world she removes darkness. Most excellent are her works. She brings light so that all fear and distress may be forsaken and disperses the gloom and darkness of delusion. She herself is an organ of vision. She has a clear knowledge of the own being of all dharmas, for she does not stray away from it. The perfection of wisdom of the Buddhas sets in motion the wheel of Dharma. That's the San Francisco Zen Center translation. Here's another by Lex Hickson. The wisdom mother is worthy of infinite praise. She is utterly unstained, because nothing in this insubstantial world can possibly stain her. She is an ever-flowing fountain of incomparable light, and from every conscious being, on every plane of being, she removes the faintest trace of illusory darkness. The wisdom mother, the matrix, guide, power, and bliss of all Buddhas and their embryonic forms, the bodhisattvas, sets in motion the wheel of Dharma. So these are powerful words. Whether you remember them or understand them, I'm guessing that you feel the power of them. And if we were doing it in a ceremonial way, it would sound a little bit different. And I think it's important And I'm sorry that we can't do it together. It really diminishes the potency when you can only hear my voice, because you can't hear the whole assembly chanting together. Here's how it would sound, though. The Kokyo, who is the person who announces these in a temple, would say, homage to the perfection of wisdom. Homage to the perfection of wisdom. The lovely, the holy, the perfection of wisdom gives light. Unstained, the entire world cannot stain her. And it continues like that. And when everyone is doing this together, it sounds different. And this is just the tiniest bit of entrance I want to have us begin into ceremony. Because without that, we miss a little bit of the wonder, and ceremonies help us sustain ourselves during times of difficulty. Now, in this particular case, the image of ultimate wisdom is seen as the mother. And in Lex Hickson's version, which I quite like, it says the wisdom mother, the matrix, guide, power, and bliss of all Buddhas and their embryonic forms, the bodhisattvas, sets in motion the wheel of Dharma. Their embryonic forms, the bodhisattvas. In all of us, there's this bodhisattva to be born. And the bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, Kuan Yin, Kannon, whatever the name, is one that we're touching with our penetration of what it means to not back away from the difficulties of life as it's unfolded in these last months and years. So I want to read now a poem, which I'll send to you, by one of our Sangha members, which is very personal rather than ceremonial. And it was written in response to kindness. The title, I would say, is Kuan Yin. It was written by one of our senior students in Lancaster, Trudy Johnston. I've read some of her poetry before. It was written in response to a gift she received of a statue of Kuan Yin. I think she wrote it or had written some of it previously because she has a porcelain one as well. Just listen and see how this, in some ways, brings us back to the essence of all we've spoken of thus far. The bone whiteness of Avalokiteshvara gleams in the morning light. Her stillness as she endlessly pours grace into the rushing river of humanity sings quietly to me. I feel her silence amid the chaos of noises, the shouts of children, the burr of a distant, busy angle grinder, the liquid sound from the goldfinches, and the endless summer hum of insects. And I'm reminded that my task is not to try to be that unyielding stillness, but to tremble as the soft bells of the clematis do on their impossibly thin stems, to shudder like the paper-thin petals of the poppy as the fat weight of the necessary bee lands and lifts off, to offer my fragrance to all as the generous rose does, to thrust into the light like the towering apricot verbascum, to stubbornly fail as the expensive peony I bought does in its third year of 2 spindly stems. My task is to be this, all of this, and stillness too. My task is to be this, all of this, and stillness too. Her stillness as she pours grace into the rushing river of humanity. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's the feeling of what we offer in silence, amidst the chaos of noises, the ordinary noises of life. And Trudy says, and I'm reminded that my task is not to try to be that unyielding stillness, not to try to set a goal. If I can just work hard enough in practice, I will finally, but instead to tremble, to shudder, to offer, to be upright. And then she gives images for each. Not trying to solve the koan, but to enter the wisdom that it guides us to, and to stubbornly fail. Because everything's changing. The only thing that actually fails is our idea about how things should be. Everything is moving in a kind of a universal perfection, even with the difficulties. And so we meet those difficulties as best we can with mindful and diligent care, but without the self-centeredness, so that our deep personal longings get transformed into bodhicitta, into the hope that others could be waked up, freed of what's bound them. And I will, of course, share this poem with you, because I thought it was quite beautiful. There's one last note, and we won't well, maybe we'll stop and we can take some time for a couple of questions. We have a few minutes. I've used a good bit of time today to sort of set the stage, and I hope that it's done so for you. But maybe if there's some comments or questions about this, so I know that we're somehow maybe hopefully a little bit on track, that would be helpful. And the way you can do that is, some of you know this, if you look down under the little reactions bit, or the little smiley face with a plus on the bottom, if you click on it, there's a thing that'll say raise hand. And if you raise your hand, then our fearless technical leader, and she's shared it there so you can see it, will know that you've stepped in line to ask a question or make a comment. So I welcome you, please. You've been listening and sitting still for a long time. I know it's a long time. You know me, I tend to want to get it all in, partly because I care about you. I want to make sure we don't miss anything. So please raise your hand for a comment or a question, or we'll enjoy the silence. What I might do as a prompt is if, are you still there, Suzanne? If
Yes,
you
I
are,
am.
you are, okay, good. You can unmute yourself, that's good. You and I worked for a while on creating the words for that introduction.
Yes.
In response to the theme that you hoped we might touch on.
Yes.
So I need, since I'm all in this little room by myself, and so I need some sense of, am I going in the right direction? How's it going?
I'm just going to say yes, you are going in the right direction.
Okay, just making sure.
Mm-hmm.
And just let me know who's next. Just pop them up. If they're spotlighted or featured, then I'll know, I can see who I'm talking to.
Oh.
Oh, it's Kim.
That's funny. Hi. Now I can't see you. Okay, now I can see you.
Okay.
Um, well, thank you, Flint. Yes, yes. What a wonderful beginning and direction that we're headed. And somehow I'm still at the beginning.
Well, you had that comment about the fire hose bit,
That's right. That's right.
So,
So I'm back with the poem that you started with, Song.
yeah.
And the thing that I'm sitting with is the weight.
Mm-hmm.
The weight we carry is
Mm-hmm.
love. And I can't remember how you described it, but I wonder if you can speak a little bit to the heaviness
Mm-hmm.
of that weight. And what I'm thinking of is how you also then talked about the essence of our practice leading us from that personal
Longing.
and opening to the broader bodhicitta.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what's swirling for me. So
Well, here's the image that just popped into my head. Do you remember when Fred or Finn were infants? Remember what it was like to carry them? And you could feel the weight of their little body, not the burden, not a struggle, but the weight of their little body. And did it feel like love?
sure. What I'm aware of is that I think sometimes even the things that feel like a burden, though, are actually, if I get down to the core of what they are, they're also ultimately love.
That's what the poem points to, and what our practice points to.
Yeah.
There's nothing that doesn't belong. It doesn't mean there aren't problems. It doesn't mean there aren't things to attend to.
Yeah. Like the fear.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been feeling a lot of fear. And I think part of what I realize is that energy is really part of my vow, actually. I mean, it points me, it's not my vow, but it points me towards, it's my deep, deep desire for things to go well.
Right. It's part of the love.
Right.
Or you wouldn't feel the fear. Just like grief is another form of love.
So is that part of the weight?
Yeah, just make sure that you don't too easily translate weight into burden. As it's a fullness. You can feel actually the weight of it because it's an embodied image. It isn't a mental one.
Yeah.
And you can feel it.
Yeah, I do tend to go one direction instead.
I think it's common, and I think it's a useful image in that regard.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So good to be with you.
I see my brother Don Coleman raise his hand, but I don't see his picture. Or maybe it's...
Just one moment. I'll switch the spotlight.
Aha, 2 for 1. That's good. Who's next? Becky? Or who is that? Oh, there they are.
So I'm talking.
I think you are.
Are. I hear you.
Hi.
There we go.
Hi there.
Hi, Flint.
Hello, Brother Flynn.
So
Good to see you.
so I'm the one who wanted to talk here, and so when you were reading this Allen Ginsberg poem,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you were talking about going back to the I guess the birth or the embryo or something. I mean, the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so recently I was thinking about that, like how random my birth was. Like I didn't have any like choice about where I was born, to whom I was born, how I was born,
Mm.
what color I was when I was born, what my eyes were like, what gender I was, whether I was healthy or sick, whether I had food or not, right? All these things are just so kind of random. And I don't remember it. But at some point became sort of conscious, right? It probably took quite a long time, but at some point started to make choices.
Mm-hmm.
And then those choices somehow created another entry point, like almost like another birth into another like room. I mean, there was some talk here about rooms or crossing thresholds, right? So like into a room, which then now there's other touch points and things that are random, right? Like things appear that are random, people appear that are random, right? And then there's more choices by either clinging or relaxing into the situation and letting sort of the choice unfold.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like when I'm able to do that, it seems like much more, well, I don't know what happens, but it just feels like there's more grace or something like this. So, but what I was struck with is how random all of this is. It's like, it just seems to me like almost like a crapshoot a lot of the time, you know? And then how to meet the crapshoot and how to embrace losing and embrace winning, or embrace like your ticket being shredded up or something like this, right? So so sometimes I end up feeling like, well, I can't do anything anyway, so I might as well just like ride the wave. But then that feels like passivity.
Well,
right?
because you've called it random. It isn't random. It's just mysterious. And you didn't choose it.
Well,
Everything,
what's the difference?
all of those
Okay.
causes and conditions that happened were
Yeah.
connected to other causes and conditions. It wasn't random. It just wasn't specified by you. You just got plopped into it. And then you started
Right.
making choices right away.
Right.
If you think it's random, then why bother? Nihilism.
Well, that's what I was saying, you know, like, what's the point? But then it seems like there are active touch points where you do make decisions,
Always.
right?
Even when you
So
were
then,
first born, just to turn toward your mother, you could smell her smell, or so you begin choosing right away, and she's responding well or not well, or it's right away. It's not random.
right. Okay.
It's just mysteriously interdependent in ways that you don't understand,
Yes.
and therefore everything matters, and therefore all
Yes.
the choices matter. But the way they matter isn't linear and small, like you get to direct the world.
Yeah. Yeah,
As you well
exactly.
know.
Yeah. And it seems like the whole, well, I don't know if I don't know. It seems to me I read somewhere about the temple, like you have a temple with like big entry room, and it's got furniture and stuff in it. And then you go into something a little bit deeper and smaller, and it becomes a little more empty, and maybe there's a bowl or something. And pretty soon you end up in an empty room, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somehow it seems sort of like, do you step into that room or don't you step into that room, or do you go back outside, right? So it seems like we're always having these choices, and then that creates more spaciousness in some way, but also I guess it's not random. I guess you're saying it's not random, but it feels really random to me, you know?
Some of the choices lead us into more spaciousness. Some of them lead us into more contraction and difficulties. That's why
Yeah.
they all matter. It's not
Yeah.
random.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
just can't see it always.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things that are coming at us that we didn't have anything to do with, but now we do because now we're impinging on it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we don't even know the reasons why it came at us. There were reasons. May seem random, but it's not.
Right. And it seems like when I kind of evaluate some of the action steps that I've taken, the things that made me tremble were the things that gave me the most joy.
My point.
Right. Like making choices where it was really scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those edges where it's a little shaky.
Yeah.
And it's also the place where you give off the fragrance like the rose too.
Yeah. Yeah.
The same space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to say anything?
So,
I see that it's the end of our time, and I know there are other people that probably have their hands up, but I want to be
By the way.
good with our time, and we'll have more time tomorrow. I'll make more time also for things tomorrow. So, Suzanne, what's our follow-up?
Thank you, Flint. What a beautiful beginning.
Thank you.
And, I'm just going to keep breathing myself, and I'm going to invite everybody else to just breathe and take in whatever wants to be landing in you. So I just want to encourage it. If you want to have a weekend of noble silence, or at least part of it, please do that. We didn't write anything about that in the weekend, because the way this is structured, we'll meet in the morning from 7 to 8 for practice, movement practice, and a little reflection. And then for those people who need to leave at 8, we'll pause for a moment, and then we'll continue meeting for another half an hour or so in discussion. And then we'll close at 8:30, 10 a.m. here in Madison. We're going to be having a walking meditation, both on Friday and Saturday morning. For those of you who are elsewhere, we encourage that you have create a walking meditation time sometime during the day. Friday morning, tomorrow morning, we're going to be at Mickey Joe's farm. And on Saturday morning, we're going to be at the Holy Wisdom Monastery grounds for walking meditation.
I want to come.
Yes, if you could, Flint, we so wish you could. Yes, we wish everybody could be together, and we're so glad everybody is here. There are about 60 of us who will be here with the retreat. And I want to do a big shout out, gratitude to Becky, our fabulous tech person. Yay, Becky, thank you so much. I think that's it. And I'll see you tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. We'll begin with 15 minutes of movement, and then we'll sit for a half an hour. And then we will have a little reflection and go on with our day. All right. Flint will be joining us again tomorrow evening at 5:30 Central Daylight Time. All right, great. Thank you, Flint. Good night, everybody.
Good night.